What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from Hive Mind Hobbies with another Tyranid Tactics video. Tyranids have some of the best lone ops in the game in the forms of Lictors, and in this video, I'm going to tell you why I favor some of the Lictors over the others and how to make the most of them. To specify the three units that I'll be talking about in this video is going to be the normal Lictor, the Deathleaper, and then the Neurolictor, in that order, in fact. And of course, everybody knows the main reason why you want to play any of those units is because the hardly knower joke. There you go. So congratulations. Your opponent can make that joke, or you can make that joke, whatever floats your boat. It's one of the best reasons to play them. There it is. But anyways, all of the Lictors have stealth. They have infiltrate and they have lone op. All three of those abilities are very, very strong, and they're useful all of the time, and it allows them to be really good secondary scorers. Allows them to be really good, mild, annoying first turn pressure, or just holding primary in a way that your opponent can't really activate into or interact with. It's very, very powerful. And all of them, in addition to those abilities, have varying secondary abilities that are also incredibly useful. The humble Lictor. So putting aside the Lictor from the other two, the Deathleaper and the Neurolictor, let's talk about it. Lictor has fights first and has 2 damage, or damage 2 on its claws. But very, very strong combo. In addition, has strength 7 if he's in Synapse, strength 8, which I feel like strength 8 is one of the most important breaking points in the game, because that means that most of troops, most of small skirmishing units, you'll be able to wound on 2s. And with the 2 damage, the Lictor is actually very annoying and intimidating for most things to just run at, right? I don't think your opponent really wants to throw scouts into a Lictor, really doesn't want to even run like Chaos Spawn into a Lictor. My Lictor has tangoed with many a Chaos Spawn from World Eaters, and about 50% of the time, the Lictor just wins, and it leaves a World Eaters player very, very sad. They don't have an invuln, so try not to be seen. Really lean on that lone operative ability, and make sure that you're pre-measuring and understanding where your opponent can shoot and how close they have to be to be shot. They're also toughness 6, which is, it's actually a pretty good toughness breakpoint, so they can be tanky, especially with stealth. But of course, be careful with them if you can, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. If the Lictor kills a character, and it's pretty likely because in addition to all of the other cool stuff I talked about with their melee output, they have precision all the time. If you kill a character, you get to eat their brains and you get a command point, and all of the Lictors actually have that ability as well. But it is always nice to mention. The thing that really sets aside the Lictor, especially from the Deathleaper, is it can rapid ingress for free. And with that, you actually have the potential of 4 rapid ingresses within Tyranids. Pretty sweet, right? You just have to do the Lictor first, and then you have to do the hyper adaptives after it. So you can have 4 rapid ingressing units on your opponent's turn. It's pretty spooky. All of those things are really great. It's a very, very strong unit with all of those abilities. Those are all very good abilities. But I think the thing that really sets aside the Lictor, and why I think it is one of the best data sheets in the Tyranid Codex, is you get all of that for 60 points. Pretty strong unit. Moving right along to our Deathleaper. Deathleaper also fights first and also has damage 2 on its claws. Same offensive profile, strength 7, AP 2, 2 damage, hoping to be strength 8 with Synapse nearby. So it's pretty much the same as the Lictor. Still a really scary threat for skirmishing units, and really annoying for certain armies to deal with. In addition, however, he has a 4-up invulnerable save, as well as a 3+ save, and he has 1 additional wound. So the Deathleaper is going to be 7 wounds instead of 6. It eats brains too. If you kill a character, then you get a command point, which is super, super cool. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's really nice. And the Deathleaper has a really strong -1 to leadership score if your opponent has a unit within 6, and at the start of the command phase for your opponent's command phase, not necessarily the start, but during the command phase, if there's a unit within 6 as Deathleaper and they are below starting strength, then they are going to take that battle shock check, and of course they're going to take the battle shock check at -1. It's pretty powerful. You can do things like really push your Deathleaper forward and then do an early Shadows in the Warp and stack that with, like, maybe you have a Broodlord up there, so you can have -2, and then if you have a Neuro Tyrant on the field, then you can get that Shadow in the Warp check to up to a -3 for them. as is a very powerful combo. If you can get all of those things together, it's a pretty good wombo combo, and you get all of those cool abilities for 80 points. Of course, it still has stealth and lone operative, but I guess it is just kind of like a personal question and then a list building question. Is the 4-up invulnerable save, is the 3+ save, is the -1 to leadership and triggering battle shock, are all of those abilities worth the 20 extra points compared to a Lictor? Maybe sometimes not. Before we talk about the Neurolictor and all the sneaky things that it does, I want to be the opposite of sneaky when talking about our giveaway we are doing with Secondhand Geek. We're giving away a Tyranid Battleforce box, the Crusher Stampede box. So if you want a Crusher Stampede box for free, in fact, maybe even making money, listen up, okay? First, you got to click the affiliate link down below to sign up through Wednesday Night Warhammer, our good friends over there, of course, and then post a Warhammer item for sale on their website of around $15. And that's it. You're entered. Boom. You get to use the incredible site of Secondhand Geek. You get to maybe get rid of something that you're not really using in your wargaming, and you have the potential to get one of the best Battleforce boxes that has ever been available to Tyranids. Check it out. The Neurolictor. I remember when the Neurolictor first came out, everyone thought it was busted. You windmill slam 3 of them into your list every single time, and you don't really talk about it. You just do it because it's such a good ability. It's okay, right? And I have come back around on it. I think 70 points is actually a reasonable point cost for it. However, there's a couple of things that oftentimes make me want to leave the Neurolictor at home as opposed to putting a bunch of them into my list automatically. So let's talk about those differences, and we'll talk about its abilities in length. First up, it doesn't have fights first, and it's only 1 damage. So it doesn't really pose the same skirmishing deterrent that a Lictor or a Deathleaper does. And I am a pretty big fan of just putting a fights first unit in a cheeky spot and really not letting my opponent's scouts or chaos spawn or whatever's at the front of the field do whatever they want, right? I want some kind of deterrent to tell my opponent, no, you can't really just charge my first screen of stuff because my Lictor's going to heroic, or my Lictor's just going to be there and get you first. The Neurolictor not having the ability to do so is a little bit of disappointing. However, on the defensive side, it is actually much tankier in my opinion than the Lictor. It has a 4-up invulnerable save, still has -1 from stealth if you're being shot at, and then lone operative, right? It's very interesting that it's toughness 5 instead of toughness 6. It seems weird. I mean, I guess he's more snake-like or something. I don't know, whatever. But it does have 7 wounds, and I think 7 wounds is actually a pretty interesting breaking point. That means, I'm going to say a couple of obvious math things. That means weapons that have 3 damage, you're going to have 3 of those go through, as opposed to just 2 with a Lictor. And that means with 2 damage weapons, you're going to have 4 go through, as opposed to a Lictor's 3. And that additional attack going through is actually pretty substantial. Top that off with the 4-up invulnerable save. Sometimes there's a pretty good chance that your Neurolictor just sticks around and is really annoying to your opponents. Talking about the main reason why you take the Neurolictor is his battle shock ability, of course, triggering in your command phase on an enemy unit within 12 inches of it. Can help you, from deterring like overwatches, can help you take over a point a little bit easier, etc., etc. It can do a lot of things. And of course, anything within 12 inches of the Neurolictor is going to get -1 to hit from its ability, and you are going to get +1 to wound those units. And it's not bad. It's a pretty strong ability. Definitely a little bit swingy. You get all of that with 70 points. So 10 points more than a Lictor and 10 points less than a Deathleaper. Seems like a fair price, but I don't know. Now, I'm sure you might have caught on that I actually favor the Lictor and Deathleaper over the Neurolictor quite a bit more, just by the way that I've been discussing things in this video. And the reason why is when I'm choosing units, I always want my abilities of those units to be definitive rather than figured out by dice. And of course, we're playing a dice game. However, there's some abilities that just happen. Like if we're talking about fights first on the Lictor and the Deathleaper, as opposed to the Neurolictor's battle shock ability. One, your opponent can just stay outside of 12 inches since it's in your command phase. and they can just stay outside of that 12 inches and just say, okay, your Neurolictor doesn't do anything. And I know the combo of you pop shadows in the warp and you advance your Neurolictor up and you get a big bubble of maybe you get 3 units that you can, get +1 to wound on. That's pretty good. I agree. I definitely agree that if your opponent has 3 or 4 units that fail Shadowed in the Warp, and you're able to get Neurolictors in position where almost all of your army, half your army gets +1 to wound, that is very, very strong. However, if you're watching this video, that probably means you've played Tyranids before, and that probably also means that you have had a very bad Shadow in the Warp. Very bad, as in maybe your opponents have stickied an objective in their home field, and the unit that is on that objective is the only unit that fails Shadow in the Warp, and everything else is fine. So in that case, I would probably rather have a unit that is 10 points less, fights first no matter what, has 2 damage instead of 1 damage on its attacks, and it is a little bit more difficult for your opponent to play around that, honestly. What do you think? Have you had really good success with the Neurolictor in your list building and in your scenarios? Have you forced your opponent to just take a bunch of battle shocks and won? Or has your Shadow in the Warp as well as your Neurolictor's activations been as swingy as maybe I'm describing? Let me know in the comments below. Regardless of the style of Lictor that you're playing, Deathleaper, Lictor, or Neurolictor, here are some tricks that you should be using when you're deploying them and taking advantage of all of their very cool, sneaky abilities during your game. If your opponent has infiltrators and you win the roll-off for deployment, you need to put your Lictors down first to screen out important areas. You see the Lictor in the diagram that I've presented up here on the bottom half of the screen. I've put my Lictor there to make it difficult for my opponent to put infiltrators on their early expansion right there. And that's just going to deter them from getting there, and it is also going to make them send an actual unit into that spot to hopefully hold that objective. Then, if I get to go first, I can decide to move my Lictor back. I can push my Lictor forward and, give them a problem early on in the game. I can do lots of things in order to help me control that side of the board without presenting too much. And then if you look at the Lictor in the middle, I have placed him there for 2 different reasons. Well, multiple different reasons. One, I can just send him up top to the top objective and just use his lone op ability and just hang out there as much as I like. And it's hard to tell by this diagram, but I would intentionally measure for this Lictor to be able to get within 3 inches of the center on the first turn. So that way, if I draw area denial, then I can just do that. In addition, that Lictor can score established locus, cleanse, etc., etc. There's a lot of secondaries that if you just put your Lictor right there in between the middle and the top objective, he's going to score you a bunch of points if you do those, right? Now, once the game gets going, you always want to barely tow your Lictor on the point if you're being defensive with it. This is going to make your opponent go as close to your army as they possibly can in order to take that Lictor off the point and able to shoot at it because of its lone op ability. It's really good to have your Lictor there and then have maybe an exocrine or some other unit off to the side, being able to pop out once your opponent has been so rude as to shoot at your Lictor. You're going to be able to shoot at whatever unit that they shot at, or maybe you can set up a charge by having a melee unit presented directly behind the Lictor. So lots of very cool things that you can set up by just relying on the ability of Lone Operative. In addition, that center Lictor, I forgot to mention this, is also screening out a bubble of your opponent's infiltrators, and it's kind of dependent on what your army comp is, which Lictor to put down first, the bottom one or the one in the middle. But if you have Gene Stealers that have a really important scout, you might want to put your Lictor there so that your opponent can't put any infiltrators in the way of your Gene Stealer scout, and your Gene Stealers can get where they want to go very early on in the game. Just screening out your opponent's infiltrators is very, very strong. When you're placing your Lictors, it is really, really important to also understand your army comp and how important they are. If I'm playing Vanguard Onslaught, which is a detachment that's near and dear to my heart, I'm going to treat my Lictors way differently than if I'm playing Crusher Stampede, and maybe my Crusher Stampede list only has 2 Lictors for scoring pieces. My Vanguard Onslaught list is going to have a lot of scoring pieces, right? So I'm going to be more aggressive with them. I'm going to be maybe attacking skirmishing units and just being up in my opponent's face with the Lictors and just causing early game problems with them. And Crusher Stampede or a list like that, I'm going to be more defensive with them and try and hold on to those Lictors as long as possible, doing the thing like towing on the very edge of the objective so that my opponent absolutely has to commit into them and really expose their army before my Lictors are able to be targeted and dealt with. So when you're building your army and when you're deploying, try to have a plan with your Lictors. Are you going to use them as early pressure? Are you going to use them as an early unit to tag and lock down units? Are you going to use them to move block? Or are you hoping to use them throughout the game to fight some primary, score some secondaries, and really profit off of their sneaky shenanigans? List building guidelines when you are thinking about which Lictors are going to be for you. Before I get into this, and just a reminder that anything on any of my videos, that's my opinion, right? So if you disagree or if you found something that you think works a little bit better than what I'm talking about, please use that. Please do that. But here's how I kind of think about when I'm adding or taking away Lictors. My list, my Tyranid list, in any detachment that I'm trying, any army at all, it always starts with 1 Biovore and 2 Lictors. That's it. That's how I start. That's going to be my scoring core right there. And then I move from there to see what I'm going to be doing with my detachment. Maybe if I have room, I'm going to add a 3rd Lictor because I actually really do think Lictors are quite strong. And then if I really feel like the list needs 1 more sneaky lone operative, my 4th Lictor, believe it or not, is always going to be Deathleaper if I have the points. I would rather squeeze the points and find room for the 10 extra points for a Deathleaper than a Neurolictor. I actually very highly value the fights first, the 4-up invulnerable, and that -1 to leadership and battle shock generation makes the Deathleaper actually a pretty strong choice in my opinion. However, if I'm going for a specific battle shock build and I'm trying to pull off some sneaky combos, I am absolutely going to include a couple of Neurolictors and really see where that battle shock shenanigans can take me. Speaking of battle shock shenanigans, this is a list that I created and I actually played it on stream on Wednesday Night Warhammer not too long ago. I'll see if I can link the specific stream in the description below. But this is a Synaptic Nexus list entitled Snakes and Screamers. And the idea of this list was I was going to lean in to the battle shock thing with Screamer Killers as well as Neurolictors. And I'm actually pretty proud of how this list turned out. In the character section, we have a Hive Tyrant with Synaptic Control, -1 damage, very good. And I think in this, I still kitted out with full melee. That's just my personal preference with Hive Tyrants. That does not necessarily mean that you having a Venom Cannon is wrong. If you have a Barb Strangler, though, you're absolutely wrong. I'm just kidding. After the Hive Tyrant, I have 2 Hyper Adaptives, one of them with the Dirge Heart, because again, I wanted to try and maybe lean a little bit into the Battle Shock, but the Dirge Heart of Karis is actually kind of difficult to trigger. But I thought if I had a unit that was going to be doing it, it would be the Hyper Adaptives because they're going to be up front. And then I have a second squad of Hyper Adaptives, and then I have a Neurotyrant with Power of the Hive Mind. I think Power of the Hive Mind is actually one of our best enhancements, like points for worth. It's pretty strong, like +1 AP, +1 strength. It's pretty disgusting, right? Strength 6 is a really good breaking point, getting elves and sisters and guard, etc. And then AP2, ignore cover. Whew. That's good stuff. Then in the battle line, I have 2 squads of Hormagaunts. I actually really like Hormagaunts in Synaptic Nexus. I think they carry all of the buffs that we have available in Synaptic Nexus pretty good, pretty well. So the 5-up invuln, +1 to hit, +1 to advance and charge. Hormagaunts natively being able to advance and charge get to make use of that way more than any other unit in our army. Then moving on to the other data sheets, you have a Biovore, 2 Neurolictors, which is the main reason we're talking about this, a Norn Emissary, 2 Raveners, 1 Ripper Swarm because we had the points, 2 Screamer Killers, and Zoanthropes. So the thing that you do with this, and in the live stream that I'm going to link, I was actually able to do this wombo combo into Magnus the Red, in fact, You line up a Screamer Killer. I think I brought him in from reserves, and you have a Neurolictor within 12 inches of the unit that you want to get. Screamer Killer screams at it, right? They have to take a battle shock check at -1. In this case, spoilers, Magnus the Red failed his battle shock check at -1. So then he was going to be +1 to wound. And I also did the battle shock grenade strat, which I am completely blanking off of in Synaptic Nexus. So I think I hit Magnus for 3 or 4 mortals. Magnus was then +1 to wound, and then I was able to point a bunch of nasty things at Magnus and kill him in basically 1 turn because of this amazing wombo combo. Have you tried something like this before? Let me know. It was very, very fun, and it was also a really good stream as well, so you should check it out. This list is just a pretty traditional Invasion Fleet list. This is one of the cool versions of Invasion Fleet that I've tested a couple times, and I've had. It's pretty fun. It's called 2 Punch Man because it has 2 melee threats instead of really leaning into the shooting aspect of Invasion Fleet. We have a Broodlord, a Hive Tyrant with adaptive biology, Hyper adapted, a Neuro Tyrant, 2 squads of Gargoyles, a Biovore, triple Exocrine. Believe it or not, I think Exocrines are good, right? We have 10 Gene Stealers, 2 Lictors, Ravners, and then 2 Tyrannofexes with Rupture Cannons. Not too much to discuss about this list. It's pretty standard. The 2 punch thing is maybe my Gene Stealers go out in early game and really kind of try to swarm the field, control, or maybe I'm screening the field and locking my opponent down with Gargoyles. And then the Hyperdaptives, of course, can rapid ingress and deliver the second punch, and it's very strong. And of course, I only have 2 Lictors, because I really do feel like with how powerful their lone op shenanigans are, they're going to contribute to this list in a way that allows me to score lots of points. Here is the other side of the coin. Here's a version of one of my Vanguard Onslaught lists that I played quite a bit. And it's with 4 Lictors, essentially. So this list has 2 Broodlords, 1 Deathleaper, 3 Hyper-Adapted Raveners, a Biovore, 25 Gene Stealers in the form of 2 10-mans and 1 5-man, 3 Lictors, and then 5 regular Raveners. So this is very, very melee focused. Of course, I don't have any shooting. I have the Flamers on the Hyper-Adaptives, and I have a Biovore shooting. But it's really, really just all gas and just running at your opponent, locking them down, and seeing if you can take them off primary, as well as getting rid of their important units as quick as possible. Having 4 lone ops means that you can be a little bit more, I don't want to say reckless or careless, but you can be a little bit more reckless or careless with your Lictors because you have essentially twice the number of Lictors that you would have in just a standard list. This is a pretty fun way to play Tyranids. It also can be pretty competitive as well, but I definitely think there's a pretty high skill ceiling. And if you make any mistakes with a list like this, you can fall behind, and it can get pretty ugly pretty quick for you. All right, everybody, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through and just taking a listen to what I think about some of our best data sheets, as well as some lists to include them in. Which of those lists did you like the most? Which one do you think that you could put on the table or take a try at? I think they're all fun, and they all have a good variety. Definitely make sure that you enter that giveaway from Secondhand Geek. You can check out the affiliate link down below, and please have a great rest of your day, and happy Thanksgiving. Bye.